Okay, so yeah, we can do questions in the chat, and then we'll address them at the end. Okay, fantastic. So we already sort of talked a little bit about what the project is. I'll just mention where we get our funding, so people can kind of get a sense of our own agenda or bias, if you want. So NextRide is ultimately funded by the Department of Energy and Mines here in Nova Scotia. So that gives us a pretty good brand, sort of neutrality, or brand. Sometimes we say agnostic. You know, we're not associated in any financial ways with any dealerships. So you know, we really come to this with very little sales pressure whenever we're talking to Nova Scotians about it. We have come up to New Brunswick. Some of my coworkers went up on a lovely weekend, and I understand it was a lovely time in between some pandemic shutdowns, and engaged a couple of New Brunswick citizens as well. Some pretty good numbers from what I understand there as well. Okay, so that's a little bit about the project. Today, we're going to be talking about something that doesn't get enough attention in my own opinion, which is the air pollutant side of transportation and how electric vehicles impact that. So you see on the bottom of our screen here, we've got four little icons. You can think of them as chapter icons. The first kind of portion of the presentation, we're going to be talking about existing data that I could find on air pollution and transportation. It's unideal data, as most data is. So if anybody has any better data, I noticed in the last presentation there were some good references getting shot out. Feel free to drop those in the chat for me. We can also discuss them in the breakout session. The next piece, I'm going to try to break down what I mean by an electric vehicle. It's not, when I say EV to Nova Scotians, sometimes they think like a Toyota Prius. We're going to be talking a little bit about what is an EV exactly, and some of the major characteristics of them. And then quickly we'll move from that into the energy generation. So although some of them have no local pollutants from any exhaust or tailpipe system, how's the energy generated and what impacts does that have on air pollution? We're going to be talking about that from a Nova Scotia lens. And then lastly, if there's time, we'll break into the future trends side of it all, and just kind of general trends where we see the industry going in the next few years. And then we'll do our Q&A. So I already discussed our project. Here's some of the metrics that we see. Actually, we can add several hundred engagements, this bringing us into the 9,000 sort of Nova Scotians that we've had a conversation with now. Over the weekend, we were pretty busy. So as introduced, we deliver electric vehicle test drives, and we are provincial in scope. We don't just hang around in Halifax. We do go all the way down to Yarmouth, all the way up to Sydney, all the way over to Amherst, and anywhere in between. And we do hear quite a bit, not just because the gas prices soared over the last few weeks, but we do hear quite a bit. My next ride will definitely be electric. We heard that so much that we named our project NextRide. So there we go. Okay, so as promised, here's the first little chapter, impact of transportation. So here's some 2019 data from Health Canada. Unideal because you see that first orange bar on the top of our data here for carbon monoxide, nitrous oxides, VOCs, PM 2.5. This is off-road vehicles and equipment, tire wear and brake lining. I wish they left the tire wear and brake lining on the associated vehicles that they're associated to. It seems to me that they grouped them all in this orange bar. So it seems to me that passenger light trucks and large trucks and buses, it seems like their tire wear and brake lining got added into a separate category. Not a fan of that. But however, this graphic is here to make the point that for a number of our air pollutants, the transportation industry has a huge impact on them. So what we're looking at is nearly a little over a 20% impact on carbon monoxide alone from that orange bar, off-road vehicles and equipment, tire wear and brake lining, as well as significant nitrous oxides and VOC contaminants. So as we go down, NextRide is a little bit more concerned about the passenger light trucks, large trucks and buses we can also discuss, and passenger cars and motorcycles. Those are the primarily electric, these are the vehicles that are already electrified. So the off-road vehicles and equipment, although very significant in this graphic, a little bit more challenging to electrify. I was talking to a ATV salesperson over the weekend, and they just didn't understand the logic and why you'd ever electrify it. So it is kind of interesting that just didn't get it. For passenger cars and motorcycles and passenger light trucks, these are sort of what we see as the quote unquote low-hanging fruit, the low-hanging fruit. So electric vehicles, as mentioned, they don't have a fully electric vehicle doesn't have an exhaust system. So there's no tailpipe. A lot of the carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide, VOCs, and PM 2.5 are generated through that exhaust system, through the combustion of fossil fuels. So electrification can significantly reduce these national percentages in our transportation. Moving right along, can't quite see it. How do I minimize that? I won't worry about it. I'll just read it. This is black carbon. So these are black carbon trends in Canada from 2013 to 2018. This is another Health Canada data stream. And what we can see is the darkest portion that we have here, transportation and mobile equipment, resulting from combustion of fossil fuel driven vehicles. We can see significant emissions, and we were actually doing good through legislation and emission control technology. We were able, you can see from 2014 to 2016, we have a downward trend in the transportation of mobile equipment, even though we have a growing population and more cars on the road. What we actually see though, is that trend is becoming reversed from 2016 to 2018. And anybody who's bought a vehicle or went to a dealership can probably guess why, or have an inclination why that is. It's we're no longer driving as many passenger cars, and we're no longer driving as many sedans, and we're upsizing or being upsized at the dealership level to SUVs and trucks. So that's unfortunate. They're less efficient to move through the air. They have less aerodynamics. So we're consuming more fuel to move a bigger, heavier car than we need to. So unfortunately, our trend is sort of reversing here, and we'd like to see it come back down, or for folks to consider an electric car to help with the black carbon emissions. Not to say that EVs are perfect. They still have tires that will emit some black carbon. They still have brakes. You just don't use them as often in an EV. I'll get to that in a minute. And they still damage asphalt and road because they are heavier than a gas car. So it's not a silver bullet, but it would significantly reduce these figures here. And the so what? The so what for this is, of course, the mortality rate, as I heard Bo mentioning in his presentation. So what Health Canada is figuring is that there's 7.5 times the mortality associated with air pollution than there is in motor vehicle accidents. So we always see these big dramatic accidents on a highway, or if you're in Ontario region in the 401 area, it seems like there's always an accident there. They're very dramatic looking. Unfortunately, and everybody rubbernecks to see the accident. Unfortunately, nobody talks about the actual more significant killer, which is air pollution. It's a more insidious kind of background noise, if you will. And these are deaths in 2019. Great. Moving right along, we can see a Canadian breakdown here by province. So this is the 2019 annual premature deaths. And the World Health Organization actually pegs this figure higher than what Health Canada does by some percentage points. But Nova Scotia, we're looking at just over 1 million people now, since this data was released in 2019. And we can see that when we look at all of the pollutants that I highlighted, all 7 of them, we can see that 260 are counted as premature mortality in 2019. So, I mean, it is harmful pollutants that we see. Of course, associating being a government figure here, it did also break it down in valuation of that person's lost life. So of course, lost work, lost taxes, lost impact on the economy is also very significant. If that premature mortality count doesn't do it for you, I'm sure the valuation can assist with that. Okay. So now moving into a little bit more of my daily conversations. Unfortunately, the air pollutant part doesn't come up as much as I would like it to. The emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, are more where people's mind goes when they think of an electric vehicle. However, the air pollutants are very important as well. So thrilled to be with you guys talking about it. Okay, so I like this. It's a Volkswagen ad. We're moving into sort of the next chapter now. This is a Volkswagen ad talking about where the industry is going. So Volkswagen, it's an important ad because Volkswagen's the largest automaker in the world. So and funny enough, they also have invested the most money in electrification. A lot of people would think it's Tesla or Nissan or something like that. It's actually Volkswagen. So partially because of their Dieselgate scandal in North America. So Volkswagen takes this ad, they put it out here, the future is electric. I think it's critical to sort of point to where the major players are headed. This is an indication to me that the industry has sort of wet their finger and put it up in the air, and they felt a change in the wind direction. So the future is electric. Of note, Toyota was holding out on electrification of their vehicles. They've led on hybrids, but anything more than that, and they've fallen behind the other major automakers. So they're only now announcing plans to electrify some of their vehicles beyond hybrid platforms. Okay, so I mentioned hybrid platforms and electrification. What does all that mean? So a hybrid electric vehicle on our furthest left-hand screen, this is your Prius, this is your Camry. We've probably all at least sat in one of these by now. If not, totally fine as well. But great technology, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to sound down on it or speak down to them. This is a perfectly suitable technology for many Nova Scotians, many Canadians. However, it does have a larger, you can see in the block text there, ICE, that's internal combustion engine. So it does have sort of a larger engine, usually a 2.4 kind of liter engine. And then it's got some regenerative brake. So that means when you take your foot off of the accelerator, it will start to slow the vehicle down. Hybrids, you have to press the brake pedal generally to get that feature. So it activates a bit of a generation with that motion. You recharge the battery a little bit. So that's how hybrids operate. There is a smaller electric motor in them. It'll usually operate the vehicle up to 30 kilometers per hour in Canada, and then generally you flip on the engine after that. So good for acceleration, and then after 30 kilometers, you're back on an engine. And it's got a smaller battery, usually 1/6 or 1/8 the size of a fully electric vehicle. So it's important to keep in mind, what we're talking about today is not so much hybrids. They're great, they're fuel sipping, they're quiet, up to 30 kilometers, but what we're talking about are vehicles that you can plug in. So the next two vehicles. So a plug-in hybrid is that next example. It's got a smaller engine, typically a 2.1 liter, and then it's got a more robust or more aggressive, if you want to think of it that way, regen brake. Typically, on almost every plug-in hybrid I've driven, you don't have to press the brake pedal. You just simply begin to take your foot off the accelerator, and the vehicle knows to begin adding a little bit of resistance to it. It'll slow the vehicle down effectively. You can come to a full and complete stop often in a plug-in hybrid just by taking your foot off the accelerator in a pretty short amount of time. And it will take that energy, instead of pressing the brake pads and offing the brake meat as air pollutant, it will instead use the motor to act like a generator and create a bit of electricity that way and add it to the battery. And the batteries are a little bit more significant in a plug-in hybrid compared to a hybrid. And then it's usually got a smaller tank of gas or diesel, although these are mostly gas driven. Typically what we see are plug-in hybrids. They can usually have a range anywhere between 30 to 80 kilometers. So after that, the engine will usually turn on, but in some cases it only turns on to generate electricity, just like at your cottage or at your house where you flip on a generator. It's basically doing that nice low energy efficient RPM cycle. So, and then it uses the motor to drive the vehicle. Pretty cool setup, but the coolest one in my books is the battery electric car. So this is a fully electric car, no motor oil in it for lubrication. Shouldn't say that. Very little motor oil for lubrication. And of course, no gas or diesel in this car. Very robust battery set, 6, 7 times what we see in a hybrid, sometimes 4 or 5 times what we see in a plug-in hybrid, and an electric motor that's quite performance oriented. So getting to 0 to 100 in these cars is usually pretty cinchy. Sometimes Nova Scotians will ask me, can these go on the highway? When I take them out on the highway and they come back, they say, yeah, they can go on the highway. And a very firm regen brake. Here we can see some of the torque of a Ford F-150 being fully electrified. So this vehicle here is towing 49 gas Ford F-150s in that train car. And this is just to show that Ford put this on just to show their upcoming Ford F-150 electric car will be able to perform some of the work functions like towing that some of their clientele may be looking for. For those of you Googling furiously what a Ford F-150 weighs, I'll save you the time. 49 of them would weigh something like 1.125 million pounds. So that's what it's towing there. Okay, so electric vehicles. Some people think, oh, it's just for the luxury, or it's going to cost me an arm and it's going to be 60 grand starting or something like that. That used to be the case. You would have been right back in 2012 or 2013. But now what we're starting to see are the prices beginning to kind of creep down on a couple of very popular models, which is great. So I'm not trying to sell you the car here today, but I'm just trying to show that it is more accessible to the mass of Nova Scotians than ever before. In addition, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia both have rebates. Here in Nova Scotia, we share, of course, the federal rebate that New Brunswick would, but we also have a provincial incentive here. It's $3,000 here. I didn't check before I jumped on the call, and I can't recall off the top of my head what it is in New Brunswick. It might be $5,000. I can't quite recall. So pretty significant, comes off after tax. So basically, for a vehicle that's $45,000, you get essentially your tax off. So that's pretty nice. And you can see some of the electrical ranges below. The Toyota RAV4, the furthest right on our screen, that's an example of a plug-in hybrid. And so that's the full range is considering the gas tank acting as a generator, like I mentioned, to extend that electrical range, but you are consuming gas. So a lot more useful than these cars used to be. Some of them only went 200 kilometers before. Now we're starting to see 400, 500 kilometers on some of the extended range, higher trim levels. And the average gas car price now is creeping up as well. So we are starting to see, unfortunately, cost parity. I would have preferred to see electric vehicle prices come down to meet where gas vehicle prices are. Unfortunately, what we've seen is a little bit of that, and especially most recently, over the last year, we've seen gas car prices come up to meet them. Not ideal for your everyday consumer. I would have preferred the other way, but here we are. Now they're almost cost parity, especially with some rebates added in there. Okay, great. So sometimes I'll get asked by the more blunt of the Nova Scotians, perhaps. They'll say, yeah, right, it doesn't have an exhaust for a fully electric. And if you're driving in electric mode on a plug-in hybrid, sure, you're not polluting. But what about the emission profile of some of the grid, essentially? When you plug these cars in, the energy has to come from somewhere. Well, what we see here is second from the bottom, solid fuels, that's coal. What we can see is we're running at about 76% coal in our graphic here, and about just under 10% renewables. And this is a Nova Scotia Power graphic. So with this emission profile, several studies have come out in North America that even on heavy coal-fed grids, like this one here, or like China, like India, et cetera, some of the states down south, it's still advantageous from greenhouse gas emissions as well as air pollutants to use an electric vehicle or fully electric or a plug-in hybrid. Plug your vehicle in and take the energy from the grid, even in this scenario. Luckily, this is a 2007 picture, and today we're using a third less coal, a little more than a third less coal, and our renewables have also jumped up. I'm just going to move that. There we go. Right. So we can see wind has jumped up and hydro and tidal as well. We're also importing more energy from New Brunswick, which has an even more diversified and renewable profile. So we're at 30% now. That's only going to keep going up by 2030. It's been signed into law here in the province that we'll be at 80% renewables. So super aggressive targets. And again, even on a very heavy coal-fed grid, it's still less emissions and air pollutants to use a fully electric car. Part of why that is, and this is going to get better and better. Here in Nova Scotia, we import our transportation fuel. It's not Canadian-made product. We don't have an Energy East pipeline or anything like that. So we actually bring it in through Halifax, through Sydney, and it's mostly Saudi and Texas-fed crude. So that's where our transportation fuel comes from. New Brunswick is a little different. They have a refinery in St. John. So we can displace some of the international imports that we're reliant on and instead have provincially produced power or more locally produced power. And then that would be advantageous for a local economy as well. Actually, last week I was at the first ever 100% municipally financed wind farm in Canada. And it's our biggest wind farm here in Nova Scotia. So it's a big part of that 18%. Cool. And this bar is in my way again. This is, I should know how to do that. I should really know. If I just click, no, that's fine. So this is some American figures here. I promised you a reason on why, if you plug into a even 100% coal-fired grid, why it's less emissions, less pollutants. It's largely just because of the way the engine works compared to an electric motor. So a gas engine is on our left, and you can see just with our graphic here where all of the energy is actually going. So say you put 100 liters of fuel into a gas tank. It's a big Ford F-150 or something. Put 100 liters of gas fuel into that tank, and once you combust it, 30, sometimes as high as 40% is just lost as exhaust gas. So heat, pollution, and emissions there. And then you're looking at 30% for coolant. Significant amount of energy goes to the cooling, and then a significant amount just to friction. And you're only really getting anywhere between 21 and sometimes if you're in a really nice car like a Formula F1 racing vehicle, you'd be as high as 30% effective power to actually move the vehicle. So if we just think about 100 liters, you're only really using 30% of it to move the vehicle. The rest of it is being lost along the way, in the most of it being of the exhaust. Flipping over to the right-hand side of our grid, the right-hand side of our slide, we can see the electric motor far more efficient at moving a vehicle. However, we never have the 100 liters of energy equivalent in our batteries. It's just fuel is very energy dense, where batteries in an average EV these days, you might have something like 3 or 4 gallons worth. So that would be like 10 to 12 sort of liters of gas equivalent in the energy. So that's why gas is still around. That's why it's so difficult. And it's taken this long to really offer people electric vehicles that go 300, 400, 500 kilometers. It's really the battery technology catching up to where gas is. Electric motors generally run anywhere between 80 to 90% of the energy that you're applying from the batteries to the motor. That's your actual motion. So a very significant difference. We're looking at anywhere from 21 to 30% on the gas side, anywhere from 80 to 90% on the other side. Awesome. So that's why low carbon, I should have scratched that out. That should be low air pollution future for an electric vehicle. Okay, how am I doing for time? It's supposed to be a 20-minute presentation. I think I'm gonna cut this one. I'll just mention very quickly, Dalhousie's got some, we're becoming a bit of a battery hub here in the province. Dalhousie specifically, they've got two excellent researchers. For those of you who've been following Tesla news, they may already have heard about Jeff Dawn. He's on the left in the salmon-colored shirt. He's working with Tesla. He just re-signed his research agreement to work with Tesla on their battery chemistry. Cheaper, how do we get the rare earth minerals either to the lowest levels ever, or minimize them entirely, or just design them out. So now Tesla batteries in North America no longer use cobalt, largely based on his work from what I understand. On the other side, we've got Lucas Swan in the checkered shirt, the picnic blanket, I like to call it. And he's working on repurposing the batteries even before recycling the batteries. So a lot of grid considerations there. You can use them to power street lamps, refrigerant at grocery stores, all kinds of cool stuff. There's a safety component to it. These vehicles are very hard to flip over. Here's an SUV. SUVs are known for flipping over, but it's difficult to roll these vehicles over because where the battery packs are all underneath the vehicle, it acts like the keel of a vessel to right it, kind of right size the vehicle, lands back on its wheels. As well, there's significant crumple zone in the front of the vehicle. So in a head-on incident, a head-on collision incident, there's a lot more energy absorption happening in the front of the car instead of the energy transferring into the driver or the passengers. So there's some significant safety considerations. And here's our beautiful panoramic of some future trends that we are seeing or hope to see. Quick note, PEI just bought another, they just pre-ordered another, something like a dozen e-buses for schools in the province. I think they have 6 now. So if anybody's from PEI that knows that, they can correct that number, but it's something like that. Really important, the people who are lowest to the ground, specifically children, are getting the most of the smog forming gases in their lungs. Their lungs are still developing. So if we can reduce that, that would be great. And this technology is a good one because we typically know how far the buses are running every day, so we can charge them accordingly. Some quick discussion about hydrogen, but we'll get into that in the Q&A if anybody has it. Okay, and then we have an FAQ. It's a pretty beefy FAQ. So if anybody wants to dig in more or can't remember from this presentation what was said, and they can't find the recording link, they could go to evassist.ca, find out a bit more about us.